Welcome to today's episode of The Chronic Report. Today's topic is death cafes. Now, death cafes are not your typical coffee shop, mom and pop shop down the street, or the big chain coffee outlets we're familiar with like Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts. These are something very different. They're popping up all across the country, and people are gathering at these cafes with the sole intent and purpose of meeting over a cup of coffee with a side of cake to discuss death and dying. Now, I have to be honest, when I first heard about this, I was kind of intrigued. I wondered, who would be interested in attending something like this, and what would the value be? My mind went all over the place thinking everything from, are these people who might have something like a fetish about death, or people who are into goth culture. But as I did more research into this, I found out these are something much deeper, much more, and they're very important. They serve an important thing of value for people looking for answers about death. And quite interested in learning more today. Patrick, when I came to you about this as a possible idea, what crossed your mind?
Well, I think the first thing that crossed my mind is I take for granted, number one, that I'm healthy. And, death, to me, whether I know it or not, doesn't feel near. And, when I think about, walking down the street and looking across the street and seeing a sign that says Death Cafe, it feels like, the hair wants to stand up on the backside of my head or on top of my head or something like that. But, the more I think about it, I take for granted that, again, that I'm healthy. And, if I wasn't, and if I didn't have long to live and I needed to figure out how to get my affairs in order, I feel like, the Death Cafe could be a place where I can go and visit with some like-minded individuals and, hopefully learn about, ideas and things that might help me get my affairs in order and help me prepare to transition to the next phase of my life.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm not in the same place as you, Patrick. I'm not quite ready yet, but maybe I will be. I know someone who does think there's a value to this, and her name is Megan Mooney, and she's joining us today. Hi, Megan. Today, we're hoping that you're going to shed some light today on what death cafes do and why they should be important to us. You are currently the founder of the St. Joseph, Missouri branch of Death Cafe, and you are also the U.S. lead of Death Cafes in the United States. Can you tell us a little more about your job?
Within Death Cafe?
Yes.
Okay. So I founded Death Cafe St. Joe in 2013. When that was really when Death Cafe got started in the U.S. was in 2012. And so my Death Cafe was about the 66th to occur, I think, in the whole world. So it was really exciting getting started then. And now we're in 2024. So we've held quite a bit Death Cafe since then, but it's non-for-profit, so it's completely free to come to Death Cafe. And in June in 2013, I started running our international Facebook page for Death Cafe and just doing the social media there. And then our founder, John Underwood, died in 2017, and his mom and sister took over running Death Cafe then, and they made me the title Death Cafe Lead US then. So I basically just run the Facebook page and then respond to people's messages and post different things and help people if they want to start a Death Cafe or have any questions about that.
All right. So is a Death Cafe a place where you can just walk down the street, see it, walk in, grab like an oat milk mocha and see somebody sitting down at a table and sit down and just kind of, see if they want to chat about dying? Or is it a place where, you have to know about it and they put on like, like groups in terms of, topics. And, you go to attend a topic and there's a discussion or something like that.
So a Death Cafe is where people, usually strangers, gather and eat cake, have drinks, and talk about death.
Okay.
We have a website called deathcafe.com where you can get on and find where there's death cafes near you. They're also online a lot. But yeah, they're actually put together by host.
Okay.
And but no, there's never any topics. We don't have topics. We don't have agendas. We don't have guest speakers. It is simply the discussion is led by the attendees. So we have found that people have enough on their mind as it is when it comes to death. So when they come there, they have something they want to talk about. So really, we just start the discussion with what brought you here tonight to want to talk about death, and that takes on a whole conversation of its own. And one person will start, and that sparks another conversation, and it could go on forever if you allowed it to. But usually, we just do 2 hours.
Okay.
But we found that it's really important to have the food part because there's something nurturing about that that helps people want to talk more about death while they're doing something life sustaining.
Right. I can imagine the food helps them feel grounded as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess you could just walk in and talk to a stranger about it, but yeah,
Sure.
we
It's
do
not
have it online where you can find death cafes.
so it's not really like a walk-in place. It's a place where, you see a function going on at a certain time and you attend the function.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we do call them pop up events because
Yeah.
some people like me, I have mine every month, like every third Wednesday of the month at the same place. But
Hmm.
some people will just have one time
Yeah.
or a couple times. So it's really sporadic depending on who the host is. But
Um,
and like I said, there are a lot online too.
I
Okay.
have a question. Here in Minnesota, we have a death cafe that's run out of a art gallery,
Uh-huh.
and it's really unique. And they do have guest speakers, and they talk about all kinds of topics. Like the most recent one was about ancient death rituals. Is I know people can contact you to set these up. Are there guidelines for people who want to
Yes.
set these up? And there is a chance that they're going to differ in what they look like state to state.
No. So we have guidelines that you're to follow in order to call yourself a death cafe.
Mhm.
So what you're talking about would actually not be considered a death cafe.
Okay. All right.
And like we're really big on that
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of reasons. And like we just had our 13th birthday, so we started 2011. Um, and Jules just wrote this big blog post about that and how important it is that everybody follows the guidelines. And so, yeah, we so that you can call yourself a death cafe and talk to the media on behalf of us as long as you follow our guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't, then you're not supposed to call yourself a death cafe. So
Interesting.
you're not supposed to have speakers or topics or anything or movies or
So
anything of that kind because that's not what a death cafe is.
you guys
Okay.
have your name trademarked?
Huh? Yes, it's
You guys have
trademarked.
your, yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Good.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
it's
interesting.
really it's very simple idea. It's just where people come together and talk about whatever's on their mind
Yeah.
that comes to death and dying.
Awesome. What brought you into uh, wanting to start up a death cafe?
Well, so I was in um, getting my master's degree in social work, and
Mm-hmm.
I had been around death and dying my whole life, and
Mm-hmm.
um, but my aunt had just died of cancer and had a really bad death, and then my uncle was going through the same thing, and I just found that like the medical field, and I was working in the medical field, and it was just he was being lied to, and my aunt was
Mm-hmm.
being lied to, and I had to step in and intervene all these ways, and my family didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how to cope, and there was no one to talk to, and it was just so much. And so I really wanted to create something like on a macro level where people could get together and talk about their experiences with death and maybe help educate each other on their experiences so they didn't have to go through these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I heard of that idea, it was really brand new, but I thought this would be a perfect thing. And it really was, because my aunt came to my first one, and I thought, oh no, because it's not a grief group. And you can come if you're grieving, obviously. Grief is part of talking about death. But I thought I was just afraid. And she came, but she was able to talk about it without getting upset, and for the first time, and really had a great conversation about it. And it was the same with my dad. He would never talk about death at all. And then he ended up coming to every single one of my death cafes and ended up planning his whole end of life plan, his, death. And it was incredible. Like, just seeing how much it changes people's lives. And not only with, end of life and death, but with living. We have not agendas, but evaluations that we give out at the end. And so many people, one of the questions is, as a result of this event, has your views on death changed? And I've had so many people say, my views on death didn't change, but my views on life changed. And that has been really incredible for me to watch.
Can you give an example?
I had one person who, as a result of coming, decided to move out of town and pursue his dream of being a comedian.
Nice.
And that he was just so excited about how he always wanted to do that, and how he just never would have done that if not. And I thought that was really exciting.
And did he do it?
He did. And
awesome.
He actually died a year ago, and so I was really excited that he got to do that before he died.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
And so coming to the Death Cafe helped him develop the courage to do that.
Yeah.
Or going to the Death Cafe. That's awesome. Right on.
I want to ask a little bit more. You touched on something that I have recently experienced, that going through the dying process with someone who is ill, and how clinics and hospitals are handling hospice. And I'm drawing conclusions, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But, for myself and my family, it was kind of a trauma experience. We didn't know how things work, how the system handles hospice. And I especially have a lot of unresolved issues about how my great aunt's hospice was handled. And, I don't want to get into too much with that because I want to hear your story. But do you think that a lot of people who are drawn to this cafe are people who are experiencing this rite of passage that's going to happen to all of us because of the way the medical system is set up and way we're being steered to handle death and dying with relatives?
I don't know that a lot of them are, but I think that there's definitely quite a bit that have experienced that. All of us have experienced a loss in our life, and and I've had this year, especially this past year, a lot of people that have just recently experienced a loss.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the way that it's handled in the medical, like not in the hospice setting, but in the hospital setting, does trigger a lot for people.
Can you be specific about what you think are some of the things that people are surprised by, or are facing, that maybe are trigger events? And is there anything people can do to prepare themselves?
I think it's just, I don't know how to explain it. Some generations have just always done what the doctor has told them to do, you know?
Yep.
And I think with the baby boomer generation, some of them are like that, but some of them will question things. Mm-hmm. And my dad was one of those people who would just do as a doctor told him to, until I started going with him. Mm-hmm. And then, because he would get medications and have them at home that he never took, but he kept getting filled.
Hmm.
So the
Yes.
doctor would think he was taking them. I'm like, I didn't even know what they were for.
Yeah.
But then when I started going and kind of took over that, it was different. But I think people aren't questioning, what is going on? Why are you telling me these things? Like, they just trust,
Hmm.
and like when my dad was dying, I knew that he was septic, and every day he got put in the hospital, and I kept asking him every day, is he septic? No, and this is why he can't be septic. They kept telling me that, and I was like, finally, I said I'm taking him home on hospice,
Hmm.
and the hospital oncologist kind of got mad at me, and I said, what is his prognosis? And he said, probably a week or less. I'm like,
Yeah.
you've been telling me this whole time he's not dying. I've asked you every day, is he dying? But I knew
Right.
he was because I've
Right.
worked in hospice for so long, and I knew he was, and I knew he was septic. So his hospice diagnosis was sepsis. But every day they told me he didn't have it and explained how he didn't have it. And
Hmm.
I never got, you know, anything from that. I mean, I got in so many fights with the hospital I was in there, and I'm someone who's handled the system, worked in the system for so long, and knew what I was doing. So I don't know how people who don't do it.
Hmm.
I because that was so hard for me.
Hmm.
Um, it's really unfortunate because
Hmm.
they view death as a failure,
Hmm.
and then with someone like me, they try to make me feel guilty because
Hmm.
I wanted to take my dad home on hospice.
Hmm.
But and my dad had went unresponsive for a day, and so my dad was on outpatient palliative care before we went in the hospital, and he was a DNR, and he had told his nurse and social worker, like, if her and I get in a car wreck, how will they know I'm a DNR? Because he was really set on he did not want to be resuscitated.
Hmm.
So when we got in the hospital, they didn't want to respect his out of the hospital DNR. So when he was unresponsive, they wouldn't let me sign DNR. And I was like, you're not going to touch him. Like, no. And so I had to get patient advocate involved. And when he came
Hmm.
to the next day, I told him. And so he had a big talk with the doctor. He's like, yeah, do not touch me. And she's my DPOA. Whatever she says is what you do. And
Hmm.
it was
Nice.
just ridiculous. Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot. And, I like to think that attitudes are changing, but they're changing very slowly.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. So you had that experience. What a lesson, though, and what a story to bring to the Death
Hmm.
Cafe.
Hmm.
It seems as though a story like that can help educate people to really advocate for themselves, and
Yeah.
help them have somebody advocate for them when they can't advocate for themselves. So, and then at the same time, it we learn to become more responsible for our own health and our own
Right.
dying process and living process.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a pretty powerful story.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing. I'm wondering, with that said, what kinds of resources do you provide through the Death Cafe? You've been through this experience. I imagine you'd be a wonderful, rich resource because you've experienced that, and you probably give people some really good advice. And is that advice universal across the country?
Sorry, what do you mean?
What I mean is, at the cafes, what type of information do you share with people who attend that might help them navigate situations like this? And is the advice you provide something that is for countrywide, or is it going to be different regionally?
So we don't provide advice.
Okay.
Um, it's just people sharing their own stories with each other.
Okay.
So, I mean, like I said, we'll start with, what brought you here tonight to want to talk about death and dying. And, one person might start off saying, my dad just died, and as a result, I'm experiencing these types of things. And now I'm really feeling like I need to live because he died, and now I feel like I only have so much more time to live. And they'll start talking about those kind of things, and then that sparks another conversation with someone else, and then a different conversation with someone else, and so it's just all group. And sometimes, depending on how many people we have, there'll be, maybe 5 people in a group talking and 5 over here and 5 over here. Or we'll have just one big group of people talking. So it just really depends on who's leading, like what cafe you're at. Like at mine, lately we've just always had a big group, and so everybody's just, but it's only one person talking at a time. So it's not that we just sit there and give each other advice. It's that we just kind of pick up on what someone's saying, and you know
Do you
talk after
screen
that.
people?
Yeah, but I mean, if someone's asking for advice, which people will, they'll. I have this one girl, and she'll be okay with me saying this. She just turned 21, and she's very keen on the fact that she doesn't have much time to live because her dad's in his 70s. And so she asked everybody, went around the table and said, what should I be doing to make the most of my life? And wanted ideas from everybody. And it was pretty cool to hear everybody's ideas.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
But no,
Wow.
we have resources like if people come there and they're grieving or need more help, we have stuff to give them,
Okay.
places for them to go to. Almost everybody who hosts a death cafe is somebody in a clinical position, like a social worker or a chaplain.
Mhm. Okay.
So you find people. It sounds to me like there's people who come who like you and like this other person who you're just talking about. They experience somebody close to them who has died and or dying, and they come to the death cafe, for support and to discuss what's going on with them, and not just people who are going through the dying process.
Right. And really, that I can recall, I've only had one person who was terminally ill and their loved one come. And a lot of people that come because they have had experience with death, or um, I mean, all of us have, but like I have a lot of people that come and they say, I've never been able to talk about this with anyone because I was raised in a family where we were told talking about death was morbid and we can't talk about it.
Hmm.
So, like, I had someone one time who came, and when she came, she was shaking because she was never able to talk about it in her family. And then I had someone else a lot younger than her, and it was the same thing. She would try to talk about it with her friends and family and get shut down. And one time I had a girl who cried the whole time, and she literally didn't do anything in her life. She didn't drive, she didn't swim, she didn't get in an argument with anyone. She nothing, because she thought if she did that she was going to die, or like if she got in a fight with someone, that would be the last time she saw them. And so her whole life was lived around this fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
so, I mean, people come for all sorts of reasons, and it's incredible to see why. But and some people really come because they want to. Our objective is to increase awareness of death while helping people make the most of their finite lives.
Hmm.
And I mean, you really do see that happen. And some people come just because they want to learn how to live their life better.
Mm-hmm.
What a great resource for some people. I'm glad that they have you.
Mm-hmm. I'm
Yeah.
curious, are attendees regular or drop in
So we have
mostly?
both.
Okay.
Yeah, we have both. There are people that come every month. There's some people that come maybe like every other month. And then there's people that come one time. Um, we have new people almost every month that come.
It seems to me, this is ripe for people building new friendships and new communities.
Yeah.
Do you see that? Are you seeing friendships? I imagine maybe there's widowers, anybody pairing off and starting a new romance. I mean, what kinds of things are you seeing as a result of these people coming together?
You just triggered something in me I totally forgot about. But yeah, so at our last Death Cafe last month in October, we had a new person that came who just moved to our community, and she actually is a widow,
Mm-hmm.
but she wanted to check it out. She just moved here, and it was nice to have her. She had a lot of great things to say. We did have a couple form from meeting at our Death Cafe, and
Really?
we were going to make a song called "We Found Love at the Death Cafe." I can't remember. It was so long ago now. It
I
was,
love it.
yeah, it was like back in 2013 or 14 now, and I can't even remember what all happened with it, but it was really neat.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, lots of friendships form. And one of the things about my first Death Cafe again was there's this table, and you know, we have rules that we follow. It's free from ideology. We don't, push our views on anyone. And, it's okay to talk about your religious views and stuff as long as you say, I believe. And, you're not trying to push it on anyone. And so this table of women were together and they were just laughing and having a great time together. And they all exchanged numbers with each other. And I don't know how I ended up finding this out, but at the end of the night, all of them had completely different background, religious views, like
Oh, okay.
complete opposites, like,
That's cool.
and, but they didn't care and they all became really good friends and started talking.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So, yeah, I mean, I think when you start talking about death, you really take off that facade and become your really authentic self. And so,
Mm,
you see that happen a lot at the Death Cafe.
nice. So, Megan, you're a licensed clinical social worker, right? That's what you
Yeah, I'm a
do?
licensed master social worker. Yeah.
Okay, nice. So I can imagine with your experience, your training, your education can be really helpful as, being present in a death cafe in terms of just kind of, helping people, helping to navigate, things that come up and so forth.
Yeah, and I have a co-host that helps me, and she's at LCSW.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. And do you guys have a screening process to, that you guys even have a problem with, or I mean, I guess you're always going to have, somebody who you got to kind of keep an eye on and who might enter the death cafe. But do you guys have some sort of screening process, or do you have any, like any stories of, any people of, that you wish weren't there, so to speak?
Not at my death cafe, no.
Nice.
We. I'm gonna read you what we read at the beginning of a death cafe, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
please do.
And then this is what we're to follow, and if not, then we would
Mm,
have a problem. But
okay.
so we
Yeah.
always say that death cafes are offered on a not-for-profit basis, an
Hmm.
accessible, respectful, and confidential space,
Hmm.
with no intention of leading people to any conclusion, product, or course of action, alongside refreshing drinks, nourishing food, and cake. And then this I'm just going to read this kind of goes with what I said earlier. Death Cafe is a social franchise. This means that people who sign up to our guide and principles can use the Death Cafe, post events to the website, and talk to the press as an affiliate of Death Cafe. The principles that we are to follow. The event is free from ideology. It is against Death Cafe principles to lead participants toward any conclusions about life, death, or life after death apart from your own thoughts. The event should feel safe and nurturing, which includes offering nice refreshments. The event should be accessible and respectful of all, regardless of gender orientation, religion, faith, ethnicity, and disability. And the event should be confidential. No individual story should be retold unless you ask somebody if you can retell their story. And if they're okay with that, then you can.
Okay. Excellent. I think that's great.
On the
That
topic of
helps set the stage.
Yeah, on the topic
Yeah.
of privacy, seems like with the drop-in and people being able to come, how is privacy maintained or protected?
So we just what I read,
Mhm.
that's all we can really do. And like I said, if
Agreed.
we just say if you hear something that you like, ask the person if you can repeat the story, just not use
Mhm.
their name. And usually people are totally okay with that.
Mhm.
I mean, because we've had some really funny things be told, and people are just like, "Oh my gosh, I got to tell that story," and they're totally fine with it. Um, no one they don't even know the person. They're not going to know, they're not going to
Yeah.
repeat their name or anything. But
Well, on that note, what about funny stories or interesting anecdotes? Do you have any that you can share with us? Give us an idea. What is it like in one of these sessions, and what kind of conversations do people have?
well, I have some that I can tell that aren't so funny, but just that were in an article. If you want me to read some of those,
Sure.
but I will tell you a funny one real quick. And this is actually from one of my friends that came, and her and her daughter came, and they actually had some not funny things happen. I won't share, but
Sure.
After a lot of tragedy, they thought that they lost their dog, so it
Mhm.
just added on to their tragedy.
Yeah.
So we had searched for their dog for 2 days or something, and it was in winter. It was last year on Christmas time. So after searching for the dog for 2 days, we were like, it was freezing, like, and so they went and looked towards the highway and they found the dog, and it was just,
Mm.
it wasn't hit by a car or anything, but it was just laying there. And so she called me when they found it, and her daughter screaming in the background saying, "That's not him, that's not him." And anyway, so they took him and got him cremated. There's this place in St. Joe you can get your dog cremated, and it's
Mhm.
pretty expensive.
Mhm.
So they did that, and then they were looking in Kansas City to find a dog to go get, because they already had another little dog. So they went there that day and took their little dog to meet other dogs, and they just didn't find one they liked. And they were almost on their way back, and they called me and they sent me this picture, and it was their dog.
Wow.
And it was all weird things. It was in my ex-husband's neighbor's next in their yard, in his yard. And I'm like,
That's funny.
what? So it had been over a week, and all of a
Uh-huh.
sudden their dog comes back to life and is there, alive. And we're like, and she's like,
Wow.
I don't know whose dog I cremated. And but
Wow.
she was so worried about it. She was like, I hope they believe in cremation.
That is a
And it was
great
just so
story.
funny the way that she talked about it, because she really was hoping that they believed in cremation, because she felt so bad she cremated someone else's dog. But we never did find out whose dog it was.
Yeah.
But it was good that at least her dog came back to life.
And that dog had a nice burial.
Yes, that dog had a very nice burial. Yeah. But there's some I can tell you. So at one of the death cafes in Oregon, one member shared about their experience of a friend who had a good death. And that's something that comes up, people, what a good death is and isn't. But their friend had ALS, and um, they talked about how he had lived his life up to the fullest until his death, going to movies, using a wheelchair, accessible van, taking a trip to Europe. Um, but the friend
Nice.
qualified for Oregon's Death with Dignity Act. Um, I'm sure you guys know what that is. It allows terminally ill people to voluntarily take lethal medications. So
Mhm.
the friend planned his death for the Thanksgiving holiday so he could be around family, so his wife would have company and someone could cook and do yard work in the days afterward. So she talked about how he had a wonderful death. And so that's something
Mhm.
people talk about.
Nice.
Mhm.
Another member shared how they were able to reconnect with a friend who was terminally ill, and they made great moments before his death. Another member recently finished going through a lifetime of family photos. She was mailed some to family, kept those most important to her, and threw away the rest. I have one lady who recently made her plans, and she's going to become a tree when she dies. And so she is taking care of all that for her family. And of course, her granddaughter's like, well, don't you think that since you're talking about that, it's going to make it happen?
Mhm.
Because, there's that superstition, if you talk about death, it's going to
Yeah, for
happen. And
sure.
I'm like, then I would have been dead when I was a kid, because I've talked about it my whole life. But, and, we have this girl that comes that's really, since her dad died, she's just really keeps thinking about how she needs to live now because he didn't get to do the things he wanted to do, and that really kind of sticks with her.
Okay.
That's
How many
interesting.
death cafes are there in the United States? And do you find people who travel from one death cafe to another in different
So,
communities and or tour
yeah, I
different
don't know
death
exactly
cafes?
how many we have in the United States. I know that they're in over like 91 countries now.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Lizzie Miles brought Death Cafe to the United States in 2012, and her and I went to Hong Kong in 2014 and started one there, which was such an incredible experience. Because it was International Death Cafe, because there was
Yeah.
a conference going on there, and it was so cool to hear everybody else's experiences from different
Nice.
cultures. Um, but I know we've had well over 20,000. It's just a matter of people actually signing it, posting theirs on there.
I can
But
imagine the cultural experience that you would get from, and you would learn
what?
about. I can imagine the cultural experience and the
Hmm.
information that you would get going to other countries. That would be
Yeah, that was
pretty enlightening.
incredible.
I bet. Yeah.
When I first started mine, I started, and I was just this little town in Missouri, and I started when like Georgia, LA, New York started. So and we had this article in the New York Times, so it was a big deal. Um, I had these two ladies that would drive 7 hours one way to come to mine from Nebraska.
Wow.
So I used to go like to Kansas City, and I would help them. So I'd go to a couple of different in Kansas City. I would drive down there and go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's a lot in the San Diego area,
Mm-hmm.
like a
Okay.
ton in the San Diego area.
Yeah.
So I think people probably go to a lot of those ones, different ones. Like in
Yeah.
the bigger areas, there's tons of different ones you can go to. And
Hmm.
then, like I said, online, there's a bunch you can
Oh,
go to.
okay.
Okay.
So I used to co-host with um, a lady in Canada. We used to do one together.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think people do go to different ones
Yeah. Cool.
depending on where you live.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious for the ones that are local, how is food determined? How do you, is it potluck? Do you organize that? And what kinds of food and drinks are usually brought there since it's central to the experience?
Yeah. So it really depends on again the host and where you're having it at. So I do mine at a coffee shop,
Hmm.
and so the guests buy their own coffee. And I've been lucky enough to have it at the same coffee shop, and so they um, only open for my death cafe at night. But I provide the cake and cupcakes and stuff,
Oh,
and
wow.
then
So you
they
make them from scratch?
no, I do not
Oh,
make them. I buy them, and
got it.
sometimes I'll have um, guests that'll cook like pumpkin cake and stuff and bring it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
But
Wow.
there's some places like my friend Mark in Georgia. He has a hospice foundation that pays for his stuff, so they'll have meals and stuff.
Oh, wow. So like actual like entree type things.
Yeah,
So it'd be more like a dinner or a light dinner
yeah. He
event.
has his in a cemetery. It's really
Oh,
cool.
wow.
Yeah,
Tell
they have
more.
like
Tell
this
me more.
really cool building and everything.
So in the mausoleum at the cemetery or just
It's
a,
not a
a
mausoleum.
facility?
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's
Okay.
really neat.
Wow.
It's Death
That's
Cafe
cool.
Atlanta.
Okay.
How do people find out about the Death Cafe? Is it growing in popularity? Do you find more people coming?
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
and especially when COVID hit, because that there was a huge need to talk about death then.
Yes.
So we were getting media requests all the time.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so just go to deathcafe.com and you can search for death cafes. And
Okay.
then, we have our Facebook page and Twitter
Yeah.
page and everything else. But a lot of death cafes have their own death cafe Facebook page too.
Okay.
But
Demographic.
deathcafe.com is the best way to find out
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
Demographically, do you see one age group more than another, or one type of ethnicity more than another, or is it pretty diverse who shows up at these?
It's pretty diverse, and again, I think it depends on where you're located at.
Mhm.
Um, it's for Death Cafes for people 18 and older. I think the oldest person I've ever had at mine was in their 80s, and the youngest I've had was 18. Um, but it's mine are mostly, I'd say, 35 to 65 that
Okay.
come to mind.
What are some common questions that people have when they call and inquire about coming to an event?
I really don't have people that do
Hmm.
that. I mean, most of them I
Okay.
think know what it is, or
Yeah.
they're just curious. They just show up and they say
Okay.
they're curious.
All right.
Now, when it first started, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
my first newspaper article,
Hmm.
my ex-husband's hairstylist, so this older lady was getting her hair done and was talking about it and just thought it was so horrible because these people were going to go to this cafe and drink the Kool-Aid and die. And this guy in Singapore, when he started his Death Cafe, because my
Hmm.
friend and I would always reach out to the new Facebook pages, and I said,
Yeah.
"How's it going?" He goes, "Well, have you read the comments?" And I started reading it, and it was the same thing in Singapore. They thought they were going to drink the Kool-Aid and die. So it's always going to be these misconceptions people
Yeah.
have. So,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
Well,
some people think it's that I own my own cafe still this day. They'll be like, "How's your cafe going?" How they think I own some cafe, and I'm just like,
uh,
so
Mhm.
the
it's
word death is a powerful word.
it
And,
Mhm.
is,
when you hear that word and then you hear cafe after that, your mind definitely starts to wander,
yeah,
when you hear it for the first time. But
Mhm.
it sounds to me that, it's death is also a word that doesn't leave your mind.
right.
And, when you hear the word or you hear about a place called the Death Cafe, it's you remember that. And then you probably, one would probably start asking questions within themselves, like, okay, well, what is this place? What do they do here? It's definitely not a place where you go to die because there is no places like that.
Right.
So it's a good way to open the door. I can see for people to start to wonder
Mhm.
and then look into it if they're in a place of curiosity in
Yeah.
their life. Yeah.
Do you find people using this or thinking this as an alternative to grief counseling or actual psychological or psychiatric care if they're, struggling with death and dying or fear, like the young lady you mentioned?
Well, we let everybody know that it's not grief counseling or counseling group.
Hmm.
So I mean that's told to them. With that girl, like took her aside and talked to her about stuff.
Mhm.
But and if that kind of stuff happens where we think that they need further help, then we'll talk to them. Now, although it's not the grief group, grief's obviously going to get brought up because that's part of death, right?
Right.
So it's obviously okay to talk about it. It's just not that we're going to educate you on how to get through grief
Mhm.
and and those types of things. But it is very helpful to talk about your experiences, what you've gone through, and those are things that it's helpful for anybody to talk about. So I think in that perspective, it's not used as a counseling or grief group by any means, but it's a healthy outlet to get those things out.
Mhm.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Has anybody ever died in a
Death
death camp?
cafe.
Hmm.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, okay. That's a good thing.
Do you have
Yeah.
a lot of people who are actively dying who are attending this, or is it more people who are supporting those, or with those kinds of issues, or people who just are curious about death?
I think it's all of the above. Like I said, I've only had one terminally ill person come that I know of that was,
Hmm.
you know, told us.
Hmm.
I have one person now who's taking care of a terminally ill person. Well, actually, I've had two people, people that come whose loved ones are like this lady who came who her daughter was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and she had it and had stage 1 cancer and it went away and she was fine. And then all of a sudden now she has stage 4 and her daughter's okay with it, but she's obviously not. And so those types of things, they come, they want to talk about it because again, they don't have anyone else they can talk to about it. And that's our culture is, and that's again with grief, like people are so afraid of it. They don't want to talk about it. They just want you to say you're okay, and so you have to have some place you can go and talk to people and say, this is what I'm going through. And I need someone to say, it's okay that I talk about these feelings I have, and you're okay with me saying this is what I'm going through, and it's okay that I'm feeling this way, because people don't have that,
Hmm.
and I
Mhm.
unfortunately, found that out for myself after my dad died. I was a wreck, and being, in the field that I'm in and everything that I do, I didn't have any support.
Mm.
And I remember running into this nurse, hospice nurse I'd worked with, and she said, "How are you doing?" And I said, and if someone asked me that, I'm really going to tell them. And I said, "I'm doing awful." And she's like, "Well, you're the one that's supposed to be helping other people."
Hmm.
That's what she said to me. I was like, and
Wow.
Yeah.
then I paid to get grief counseling. And the first day I went, the lady said, "Do you really think you need this?"
You're kidding.
No, I mean, I just gave up. I was like, and so I went through 4 years of just pure hell because
Wow.
I didn't have anyone,
Hmm.
and so it's like people need people this to be able to say it's okay that you're going through this, you feel this way, and yes, you can talk about it,
Hmm.
you
What do
know.
you what do you think is wrong? Is it an American thing? You're an international organization. You might be able to see how people view death differently, but I mean, you're right. Nobody does talk about it till it's like in your face and you have to deal with it. And even then, at a funeral, people will be in total denial and acting like, no,
Oh,
it's just a party. What is that about us? And, you know, I mean, what do you think culturally? Where is it coming from?
it's just if you have to people, if they have to face it, then they realize that it's going to happen to them,
Mm.
and people just can't consciously deal with
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
and
So,
it's like there's a whole thing about death denial and care
hmm.
management theory, and it's very interesting if you read about it.
Hmm.
And just like one of the things at my dad's funeral, someone said, "Oh, he's in a better place," and I just got so mad.
I hate
People
when
just,
people say that.
yes, the euphemisms and the
Yeah.
throat pillow sayings and it's
Yeah.
just, and some people they really do it with good intention, but it's just not validating the person's
Hmm.
pain, and you know, um, and so that's something too that we as an organization try to educate people on through our social media and just and things. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. Well, Megan, we're running out of time here. Is there anything that you can think of that you'd like to share with the audience in regards to what might be helpful for them to understand about the Death Cafe, how it might benefit them, how to find the Death Cafe? I understand that you guys have a website, you have social media platforms. Anything that you would like to share with the audience?
Like I said before, just go to deathcafe.com and you can
Yeah.
find one online. There's plenty online, or you can search for one in your area.
Okay.
I think it's helpful for everybody to attend one at least, give it a chance, and you know, listen to. And you can go and not speak. You can go and just listen.
Yeah.
No one's gonna force you to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I said earlier, a real authentic Death Cafe is one with no speakers or
Right.
um, agendas
Good to
or
know.
anything like that. It's just
Yeah.
simply ran by the attendees.
And I
Hmm.
love the idea that they're all over the world.
Yeah.
And, it's intriguing to me that if I were in India or Turkey or something like that, I might want to go visit a death cafe there. maybe not so much in the United States, just because I'd be more curious to understand how people perceive death and dying in another place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, I don't know if I want to use the word fascinating, but intriguing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I really appreciate, what you shared with us today. And I really appreciate you and what you do for,
Hmm.
and how you support people and providing a place to support people who experience, death and dying in their own in their own way. Um, so, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
pleasure.
All
Yeah,
right.
Nicole, do you have anything that you would like to share?
No, I agree with you, Patrick. I think this is wonderful, and I learned a lot. I had to chuckle when, near the end there when you were talking about the sentiments that people say to you at the funerals and all the little quirky cultural things that we do with funerals. That's really, um, we all been there, we've all experienced it, and like you said, people are well intentioned, but it's crazy how it hurts. It really
Hmm.
can hurt really bad. And I hadn't thought about that till you brought that up, but it's so true. I guess I would just want to know from your experience and your training, what is the right thing to say? What is the right way to approach someone who is going through that process?
Just even just saying I'm sorry,
Yeah.
sorry for this pain you're in, and
Mm,
I'm here with you, you
yeah.
know.
Mhm.
And if you're going
Empathize.
to do something for them, just do it. Don't say I'm here if you need anything. Just do something for them, whether that be make them food or um, just be there for them and actually show up and do something for them is actually
Perfect.
really helpful.
I love it.
And don't make it stop after a week after the funeral.
Mm,
Mhm.
Just continue to check in on them.
right on. Excellent. All
Well,
right.
thank you
Well,
very much, Megan.
Thank you guys.
Hmm. All right.
yeah. Pleasure.